Five Nights at Freddy's is a series of 10 games that create an emotional and complex story surrounding a business, Fazbear's Entertainment, and the two men responsible for creating these ominous monsters. The Five Nights at Freddy's franchise has spanned across 8 years and has left many mysteries for the horror community to solve, with the biggest one being the story. And one way to follow or understand the story is by studying the man at the center of it all, William Afton. It is undeniable that William Afton is the most influential and the most important character in the entire franchise, but why? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over the entire FNAF lore of William Afton. Let's get started. Our story begins with our protagonist William Afton and his business partner Henry Emily. In the early 1970s, together they decide to open a business, more specifically a restaurant that would not only serve food and drinks, but it would introduce a new form of entertainment never seen before, animatronics. This restaurant would include Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, two animatronics that would also serve as spring lock suits. This meant that Henry and William could wear the animatronics as a suit and walk freely in them, but when they didn't need to, they could wind up the spring locks, making them perform on their own. This business was massively successful, and because of this, in the early 1980s, William and Henry decided to open a second location named Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This restaurant would include the very first iterations of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica. It also included another animatronic designed only by Henry called the Security Puppet. Although Henry and William were business partners, Henry had always been cautious of William, forcing him to create the puppet, who would monitor the safety of the children using colored security bands. He would also hope that it would protect his own family and his only daughter, Charlie. But moving away from the business aspect of things and looking at William Afton's own family, it's a lot more dynamic. He had 3 children who were named Michael, Evan, and Elizabeth Afton. He also had a wife, but she never played that big of a role in the family. But in 1983, William's life would start to derail in the worst way possible. During Evan Afton's birthday party, his older brother Michael decided to play a prank on him by bringing him closer to the one thing he's the most afraid of, being the animatronics. Michael and his friends picked up Evan and threw him into the mouth of Fredbear. But because Fredbear's spring locks were activated, he would close and open his mouth as if he were singing and performing. And because Evan was inside of Fredbear's mouth, his jaw clamped down, biting Evan's head. He was taken to the hospital, where Michael apologized to him and where William Afton said his final goodbye, promising to put him back together. This death in the family obviously devastated William Afton, causing him to spiral into insanity. He began drinking and even became abusive towards his family, and especially towards Michael, who he mainly blamed for the incident. But one night, William did the unthinkable. While driving around alone and angry, he decided to drive behind the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. There in the alleyway, he saw a girl locked outside, and not just any girl, but it was Henry Emily's own daughter, Charlie. She had been locked outside when the security puppet was trapped in her box and failed to notice that Charlie had been shut out. But in that moment, William had decided to inflict the same pain he was feeling onto someone else by taking away the same thing he had lost. So in a moment of desperation, loneliness, and rage, he murdered Charlie. He then drove away, leaving nothing behind but his tire tracks. But little did he know that his first murder would cause a chain reaction of giving life. Once the security puppet was freed from its box, it immediately went outside to check on Charlie, but it was too late. All the puppet could do was try and comfort Charlie's lifeless body, but in this moment, Charlie's soul would inherit the puppet, making them one and giving the puppet life. But because the franchise now had 2 deaths surrounding the business, this forced Fazbear's Family Diner to shut down and retire the 2 animatronics to the storage room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Now, although this saddened William, he had also felt a sense of fulfillment to what he had done on that night. He almost felt thrilled by it and the idea of it, so on June 26th in 1985, he decided to do the same thing but to a greater extent. In the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, he would wear the Spring Bonnie costume and lure 5 children to the back of the pizzeria one by one. Then he would murder them and stuff their bodies into the 4 main animatronics. And the 5th one would go into the Fredbear costume from the old location. This would be known as the Missing Children incident, and although William was a suspect of their disappearance, he would ultimately walk a free man. But Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would still close down, making it the 2nd location to close in the franchise. Although Henry would open a new location, phrasing it as the grand reopening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This location included the toy animatronics, which were friendlier and better designed versions of the older animatronics, although the old ones would stay in the storage room away from the main attractions. Henry would also fire William from the business since he was a main suspect of the missing children incident, and Henry had always suspected him of Charlie's murder. This obviously enraged William, so he retaliated by creating a new business called Afton Robotics and by opening his own location, Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would include include new animatronics using new technology. It would feature Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Foxy. At the surface, it seemed like these were normal and friendly animatronics, but William designed these to murder. Circus Baby, for example, had a claw reach out of her stomach, dragging anything it caught inside of her body. And a week before the restaurant opened, that's exactly what it did. William's own daughter, Elizabeth, got too close to Circus Baby, trying to admire her, and before he knew it, her body was now inside Circus Baby. As a result, the location closed down, and William Afton had lost someone else in his family. William was in a worse place than ever. He was kicked out of the business he created, and his new business was failing with the closure of Circus Baby's Pizza World. And on top of all of that, he had now lost 2 of his children to his own creations, all while Henry was succeeding. So in another moment of even more desperation and even more rage, William decided to go on another killing spree with the sole purpose of destroying Henry's business. So in 1987, William sneaks into the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location using the same Spring Bonnie costume he wore once before. Again, he lured 5 children around the pizzeria and murdered them. This time, not even trying to hide the body, so Henry would be to blame for all of it. And the following week, after security guard was bitten by Mango, losing his frontal lobe, the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was finally closed. After some time had passed, William felt content with what he had done with William, but not only was he fulfilled, but he was also curious, as when he was in the restaurant, he noticed that the withered animatronics acted differently, almost as if they were alive, especially the puppet. Not only were these animatronics acting differently, but even Circus Baby was different after Elizabeth's death. Even her eye color changed to match Elizabeth's. But in order to discover what was really going on, he needed to experiment on these animatronics, and what better way to do that than on the actual animatronics he stuffed those bodies in? Well, Henry had actually opened a new location using the repaired withered animatronics. It was on a much smaller budget and it was a much smaller restaurant, but this location also ultimately failed as it never raised enough money to keep itself afloat, meaning that the animatronics resided in that abandoned location. And William, after knowing this, knew he could sneak inside and dismantle these animatronics for parts and use them for experiments. He even opened another smaller location named Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental that would serve as a front for what he was actually doing. This location was in an underground bunker that he built years ago where he would work on animatronics and where he would hide from the world. Here he could take apart the animatronics and learn what exactly gave them life. So each night, William would go to the abandoned pizzeria and lure the animatronics to a part of the pizzeria without any cameras. There he would dismantle them piece by piece and bring any scrap parts to his underground bunker. Night by night, William would sneak in and he dismantled the 4-man animatronics, unknowingly releasing the souls from the physical animatronics. So on the 5th night, he goes back to the pizzeria to find any leftover pieces and scraps, but instead he finds the 5 souls of the 5 children he murdered all those years ago. Afraid, panicked, and confused, William runs to the Spring Bonnie suit and wears it one more time in an attempt to try and scare them or run away from them. But because of his sweat and condensation from the room, the spring locks activate, crushing William's body inside. The spring lock system was very sensitive to water, as the slightest amount can cause a spring lock failure. And that's exactly what happened to William. His flesh and the metal of the spring locks meshed together and all he could do was lay there helpless. Now Henry had actually been alerted about these break-ins, and when he arrived at the pizzeria, he found the spring lock suit with William's body inside. And because he still blamed him for his daughter's death, and because he had so much resentment towards William, he decided to seal the room, leaving him inside to die. 30 years had gone by, and for those 30 years, William sat in that costume rotting, but he wasn't dead. Somehow he was alive and became the Spring Bonnie suit, just like his victims and their animatronics. But he was about to be freed when a new company decided to open a horror attraction in the same pizzeria named Fazbear's Fright, and their new security guard would be none other than William's son, Michael. Well, before William had even been spring locked, Michael was on a mission to find him and undo everything he had done. He visited both Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations, working there as a security guard under a fake name. He even visited William's underground bunker, but ultimately his efforts failed as he was never able to find his father until now. So on the second night on the job, William was discovered and was added to the horror attraction, but for Michael this meant that he would now walk freely and was trying to attack him. William could hardly recognize his son, but when he did, all he wanted was revenge on him, as he still hated him for what he did to Evan. So for 4 nights, Michael would fend off William with the sole purpose of surviving, and on the final night he decided to end it all by burning down the pizzeria with William inside of it. He was successful in burning down the location, and in his mind he had finally stopped his father once and for all. Now William was burned in that fire, but he had survived and had a new purpose in taking revenge on Michael and Henry. After a short period of time, Henry decided to open yet another restaurant, but this would be his last location. He called it Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, and it was designed where Henry would hire a manager and they would create the restaurant however they would like. But they would also need to complete anything under paragraph 4, which consisted of salvaging the remaining animatronics and gathering them in one place for a big party on Saturday.
Don't forget Saturday. You want them all to be in one place.
This manager would need to salvage Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, Lefty, and of course William Afton, who had been named Scraptrap. And who better to be manager than Michael Afton? He would take the position as one last attempt to stop his father. And on the second night, he had come face to face one more time with his father. William had been lured to the pizzeria and was one of 4 animatronics trapped there. On the last night, Michael fought off all animatronics including his father. William wanted nothing more than to murder Michael, and right as he got close,
connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth.
Henry and Michael were able to successfully gather all animatronics for their big party on Saturday, which was to burn them all, finally putting to rest the Fazbear's entertainment and all of its victims. All except for William Afton. This time he would not survive the fire, and instead the monster that caused everyone's suffering would now fade away.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
But instead of William being sent to hell, Cassidy's spirit holds him back and tortures him with his own creations. Cassidy's spirit was inside the Fredbear animatronic, and her only purpose after her death was to get revenge on William, and that's exactly what she did. William would have to fight off 50 of his creations in one of his offices, and if he was killed, it would start all over again. Even if he survived until 6 AM, Cassidy would still kill him and force him to restart. He meets a cruel but fitting end by being tortured by all of his creations for eternity, thus ending William Afton's story. Now I'm sure that many of you are thinking that this isn't the end of his story, since we do see Glitchtrap and Burntrap in these newer FNAF games, but I believe that these are not reincarnations of William Afton, since I don't see a reason for his story to keep going when most of the Afton era has already been solved. Continuing to use William as the villain would just feel repetitive, and I think that Studio is starting to move away from this character and that storyline with new characters like Vanessa and new stories like Ruin. I think it makes more sense that Glitchtrap or Burntrap is actually the mimic from the book series that is trying to copy William and his actions. Now this can be argued, but again, I think that William Afton's story ends at Ultimate Custom Night. But with all of that said, this was the full FNAF timeline of William Afton, and I hope you guys enjoyed. But remember that nothing in this video is confirmed or has been solved, and especially in the early parts of the timeline, since a lot of it is left to the assumption of the fans in the community. So if you guys disagree or would place events in different orders, let me know in the comments. And by no means do I think that I've created something revolutionary with this video, but I do think it's a fairly easy way to understand this complicated lore by only focusing on one character. I also wanted to give a quick thanks to a good friend of mine, JC, who actually had a big part in making this giant Google Doc filled with all of the FNAF lore. I used many elements from this Google Doc to create this timeline video, as originally we were supposed to make an hour-and-a-half timeline video that would have been a complete timeline, but unfortunately we never finished it. So let me know if you guys want me to make a full timeline or a shorter timeline video on another character like Michael Afton. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.